Good afternoon and welcome to the Yoga Biz Studio on-air show, a weekly internet show of 10 to 30 minutes in length, hosted by me, Carla Wilson, owner of Wilson Media Services, and my colleague,
Keeley Mitchell at Z Living.
On our show each week, we share business, legal, and marketing insights for yoga studio owners and independent yoga teachers. For our Google Plus on-air show, we employ Google Plus Hangouts on Air. This allows us to live stream video on our Google Plus page, on YouTube, and as well, yogabizstudio.com. However you are watching our show, thank you. We appreciate it. Just to give you a heads up, if you are watching via YouTube, please feel free to click the yellow graphic at the bottom of the video player. That will navigate you over to our event page where there is a Q&A panel. Please feel free to enter any questions you might have, and Keeley and I will do our best to answer your questions during the show. So let's move on to today's episode, where we will be discussing franchises. I'm sure that Keeley and I are not the only yogis here who've gotten an email with a subject line that says, "Open your own successful yoga studio now with our proven system." So actually, let me clarify here. Keeley is our resident legal expert, and she's going to be talking about franchises. And I might be asking a few questions. I'll just be following along, but I just wanted to make you aware of that. So again, please remember, if you are watching the show and you want to ask questions, go ahead and enter a question in the Q&A panel, and we will follow along and answer your question. So Keeley, why don't you start with giving us an overview of franchises?
Thanks, Carla. For those of you who aren't familiar with the concept of franchising, I'll give a quick kind of overview of what franchising is with some examples. When you see like McDonald's, Subway, Jiffy Lube, Supercuts, the list runs into the thousands. Those are all franchises. Someone has actually gone to, say, McDonald's and said, "Hey, we want to open up our own McDonald's somewhere," and McDonald's gives them the franchising rights to do so. Pretty much almost any time you go into a store that you can find somewhere else in the country, you're most likely walking into a franchise, although there are some exceptions. Like Starbucks is still privately owned, Barnes & Noble are privately owned companies, and actually, because I'm a fanatic about Cheesecake Factory, my girlfriend and I years ago wanted to open up our own Cheesecake Factory, but we were sad to find out that is privately owned and we can't open up our own Cheesecake Factory. So it's not every large business that you see throughout the country, but for the most part, most of them run on that manner. An individual can buy into the franchise, often spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to run it. And say that's like a UPS store, Domino's, Gymboree. The big ones can get extremely expensive. Now, if you have some of the smaller ones, it can be a little bit cheaper, and it doesn't have to run that high. It can just be maybe, in the tens of thousands versus the hundreds of thousands. The franchisee, actually, once they come into the franchise, continues to pay the franchisor an ongoing fee. It's often referred to as a royalty fee out of its sales. So maybe each month, maybe each quarter, out of the sales that they make, they will then turn around and take a part of that and pay the franchisor. So that's why a lot of these companies want a franchise, because it's like money coming in, like from all different places on a monthly basis, without them having to do anything. So oftentimes, one key thing I will warn about franchises is that once they pay this royalty fee, oftentimes there's not much left over. So that's something really key to think about when you're going into franchise if you want to run a franchise for yourself.
Got it. So Keeley, franchise business owners are not only buying into the business methods of the franchise, are they? They're also getting marketing materials and operations manuals and other standard operating procedures, right?
Exactly. You're buying into as you said earlier, they're proven system. Like they have already supposedly worked out the kinks. So you're kind of walking into a pre-made business. You know, your marketing materials are already done. You know, they kind of hand you this manual and say, here are the rules. Here's how it all works. Go for it. But before I kind of get hot and heavy with the business and legal stuff of franchises, I did want to point out some of the popular yoga franchises in the country. And now, everyone, this is going to be after our episode. We're going to have this up on the website with links if you are interested in pursuing one of these franchises for your business. But there is Yoga Pod that's out there. They're very big in Colorado, like Boulder, Denver. They're throughout Texas, and I know they're getting ready to open up a franchise in Portland. So that's kind of like, I guess, Midwest to Southwest to the West Coast. So if you're out there, you might want to consider Yoga Pod or be one of the first to bring it to the East Coast. There's also Open Doors Yoga Studio, which when you go to their site, it's kind of a neat concept. They're mostly in Massachusetts, and they do have a studio out in El Paso, Texas. So don't know how they jumped from Massachusetts to Texas, but that's where you can find them. Then there's Sunstone Yoga, and I know Sunstone Yoga is pretty popular. I don't know if it's because I lived in Texas briefly, and they're all over down in Texas, but they seem to be growing, and their name is pretty much known throughout the yoga community. But they also have a cool website too, so I don't know if that's why, or like I said, maybe because I was temporarily a Texan for a while, and that's how I knew about them. Of course, everyone's heard of Bikram. They're all over the country. If you are interested in doing, practicing and teaching that style of yoga, you definitely have to join into their franchise. That's how they operate, and you have to be given a license to actually run those type of programs. So they're all over the place. There's also a body and brain yoga studios, and they actually practice, which I was telling Carla, I want to try this out. They call it Korean yoga. And it's, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Dan Yoga. So I'm really curious to find out about them because I never heard about a specific Korean type yoga. But they also teach Tai Chi and meditation there. They just seem like a really, really cool studio. And they are actually located throughout the country as well. From California to New York, you can find their studios. So if there's one near you, definitely check it out and tell me what you think, because I don't think I saw one in the Philadelphia area. Then there's Breathe Yoga, and they're pretty much in upstate New York. And then there's also Core Power Yoga, and they're pretty much throughout the country. I know a lot of people question whether Yoga Works, which is very popular and located throughout the country, if they're a franchise, but I wasn't able to find any clear evidence that they actually franchise their studios. I'm getting the sense that they're pretty much private studios, and they just actually are growing and opening up studios throughout the country. So, but I am watching them. There is kind of a debate whether they are franchising quietly or it's just a company spreading. So that's a quick overview of some of the yoga studios that are out there that are franchising, if that's what you want to do. But we'll have the links if you're interested in any of them that you can click on. So getting into the fun part, what is the attraction of yogis opening up a yoga studio franchise versus their own business? That's kind of the key question today.
Yeah, I think, Keeley, in my opinion, I think that considering a yoga franchise is a smart option for someone who has money and has the motivation to start up a business, but they don't yet quite have a lot of running a business experience. If they buy into this franchise, then they're able to pick up and run with the ball, so to speak. They don't have to try and reinvent the wheel. They don't have to try and figure out the business systems from scratch because, again, as you mentioned earlier, that's part of the franchise.
You're exactly right, Carla. The real value of a franchise is what you gain from experience, know-how, and operating and business plans that come with becoming a franchisee. Most franchises actually send somebody out from headquarters to help you get started and running. So they kind of walk you through their procedures and kind of guide you through how to do everything. So that's kind of one of the biggest things of why you want to go to a franchise. You just instantly have a support group. And without having the professional training, business experience, or connections it takes to succeed, it's very difficult to get a yoga business, or any business for that matter, off the ground. Many small business owners even hire outside individuals with experience just for that type of advice. So simply put, opening your business independently takes time and money. So when you step it into a franchise, you're kind of maybe condensing that. I'm not saying it gets so much easy where you don't have to work hard at it. I mean, it's any business, you're going to have to work hard at it, but it kind of comes pre-made for you. So I came up with 3 key reasons for opening a yoga studio franchise. The first one is you want to own your own business, and that's kind of what it gives you. While you're part of, the franchise, you, the franchisee, is still considered as owning your own business. So that's really nice. 2, as we and Carla keep saying, it's a proven business process, like for success. I mean, generally, these businesses were successful on their own, and then people started coming to them saying they wanted to open up more branches, and then they decided, hey, why don't we franchise it? And do it that way. So these businesses have already been proven to succeed, and it's kind of like as long as you follow their formula, you should be able to succeed as well. And then lastly, you don't want to risk too much. Stepping out on your own, you don't have a proven system for success. You kind of got to create it on your own, and so there's a lot of risk involved. Whereas when you're stepping in, doing a franchise, your risk goes down slightly. Not completely all the way, but it goes down considerably.
Yeah, I can definitely see the allure of wanting to buy into a franchise because, but the other thing is I'm sure it's not the perfect business model for everyone. If it were easy and inexpensive, everyone would have a franchise, right? So what are some of the reasons? What are some of the reasons why someone wouldn't want to start a franchise?
Well, there's quite a few. Not everyone is cut out for running a franchise, and I definitely tell people, do your research before you become a franchisee owner. So I've come up with, I believe, like 7 drawbacks to opening your franchise. The first one is questionable profitability. The franchise cannot guarantee you're going to make so much. It depends on your location. It depends on how much work you put into it. So there's a lot involved. And also when you're reviewing their disclosures and everything, when they're telling you about profits, it's generally on average, the average of all the other franchisees out there. So I always suggest, since there's no guarantee in this, that you try and speak to other franchisees in your area to kind of get a sense of how their business is going, and definitely review those disclosure documents. I mean, as in anything, it's going to be written so it looks favorably upon, the franchise. So you might have to do a little bit of digging to kind of figure out really what the real numbers are and really what are your chances of being profitable at this business. The second one is the high startup costs. I touched upon this in the beginning. Depending on the franchise that you're stepping into, it can be really expensive getting started. Not only is it a lot of franchises make you pay a non-refundable initial franchise fee, and that can run anywhere from thousands of dollars to several hundred thousands of dollars, and that's just getting their materials, just so you can read through it, because a lot of it is confidential, so you got to put some money into it first before they kind of start releasing this information to you. But in addition, it's, if you have to get inventory and equipment, even if it's like you have to design your studio in a particular fashion, which might cost so much money, and it also sometimes takes several years to recoup all of the expenses that you initially put into the business. So you have to be very careful about the startup costs and be very realistic about what this is going to cost you. Number 3, I labeled it as encroachment. When you're opening up a franchise, where is the other franchisee in the area? Some franchises allow you to open up anywhere, so you might have, your yoga studio on one corner, and then 2 blocks down, another franchisee opens up their yoga studio. So now you're competing for the same target audience, which isn't good. And then there's franchises that are out there that'll give you a territory and say, okay, maybe in this town you're the only yoga studio, and then, in the next town over you'll find another one. Those are the ones you're going to want to really steer towards, because you just don't want to be competing against other franchisees. You really want to make sure that you're able to attract the target audience and not be competing so much. I mean, there's going to be competitors even outside your franchise. So you just don't want to be competing within your own. Number 4 is lack of legal recourse. A lot of these franchises are set up where you are waiving your rights under federal and state laws. Many of them require mediation, arbitration versus going into court if there's an issue. Many of them have you waive jury trials. So you just really need to read the information very, very closely. And then, of course, how strong. I mean, franchisee up against a franchise. Oftentimes franchise has more money, more power, more of the legal team behind them, and it's a harder battle to fight against them. So that's just something to pay very close attention to. And you can probably find out from other franchisees about possible legal disputes and what it's like to deal with their franchise. And then there's also limited experience. This is number 5. As I touched upon a little bit earlier, when you're entering into a franchise, oftentimes, you don't have as their whim. You have to run your business the way they tell you. So if you decide in your area you want to run a special, the franchise can actually tell you that's not permitted. We're not running those specials this week or this month. So that can kind of get a little frustrating. Number 6 is the royalty payments. Once you go into a franchise, you are consistently paying royalty fees back to the franchise. And depending on how well you're doing, that could really, limit the profits that you're taking home that you need to survive on your business. And then lastly, there are restrictions after you're done running your franchise, competing with the franchise. And what I mean by that is, if you run a yoga studio franchise, say for 5 years, and then you realize, what, I can do this on my own. I really don't like the franchise. I want to open up my own yoga studio. Most likely in those materials that you originally signed, there was a non-compete clause in there stating how long after you leave the franchise you can open up your own, where you can open it up. Many of them have, say for the next 2 years after you left, you cannot open up another competing business within 15-mile radius of where your franchise was. So depending on where you live, that could be huge and kind of impede you opening up future businesses that you would be interested in. And definitely you can't be part of a franchise and then go and partner with someone else in another yoga studio and have both of those running at the same time. So you have to be really, really careful about how the franchise limits your ability to run other businesses in the future. And then most importantly, I tell everyone this: if you're going to open up a franchise, hire an attorney. I am not trying to self-promote or anything like that. I don't do franchise law. I would direct you somewhere else. But it is so specific of an area, you really want to hire an experienced attorney as well as an accountant. There are just too many legal ramifications that you will want a lawyer to review, and there's just so many numbers that you're looking at that you might not get, and maybe an accountant would be able to run the numbers and really make sure that you're not getting in over your head. So that's my biggest thing. Franchise, make sure you have an accountant and an attorney experience dealing with franchises to help you out in the process.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so Keeley, let's touch, I know this next question you and I spoke about, and so it could probably take up its own episode by itself. But what if someone, say a yogi, wants to start their own yoga franchise? What if they believe that their models and methods are the next big thing? And so where would they start?
Well, being a franchisor can be a great way to continue generating income. I mean, if you're running your own studio and so many people are like, oh, we would love to open up a studio like this too, pretty much while you're running your studio and other people are running if you franchise it, they're just going to be sending you money. So it's a great way to generate income without doing anything else. However, it can bring many headaches at the same time when you're trying to do that. I mean, one key thing is if someone else opens up a studio under your name, now you're becoming a watchdog to make sure that they are protecting your brand. That they're not doing anything that's going to tarnish this brand name that you've brought up that everyone wants a piece of. So that starts there, a lot of headaches. But just as I said with franchisees, before you jump in, make sure you have all the facts. Make sure you do your research. And of course, the best course of action is hiring an experienced franchise attorney. I just wouldn't recommend someone trying to franchise and do it on their own. You're going to want an experienced franchise attorney working with you because there's just federal and state disclosure laws that you need to make sure that your franchise company is complying with. And if you fail to comply, it can be very costly. You can be sued. The last thing you want is the federal government stepping in. So it's just a lot involved and very detailed when you open up a franchise. So, I suggest sitting down with an attorney and telling them your ideas, talking it through with them, and so that they can really help you weigh the pros and cons of doing this. But if you can do it, it's a great money generator, that's for sure.
Yeah. Again, Keeley, for all that expert advice. To our viewers, we remind you that all of these notes will be available on our blog. We'll have links to the yoga franchises that Keeley suggested, as well as her 7 reasons why you wouldn't want to open a yoga franchise. So let's move on to today's takeaway topic. Basically, because we always like to have our takeaway topic relate to what our episode topic is about. So for this segment, we want you to consider, if you're going to start a yoga studio, it would definitely be worth your while to do a pros and cons list of, debating the costs, the advantages, the disadvantages of opening up a studio versus you buying into a franchise. So, definitely give that some time if opening a yoga studio is something that's on your bucket list, on your dream list.
All right, great. Yes, great takeaway. All right, so on our next episode, we'll be discussing summertime success habits. Summer's here, and we're all getting in that summer frame of mind. So it's a great way to touch upon a few things and make sure that through the summer you're continuing success and that you don't check out completely on summer vacation. So we'll be going over that with you. And so tell your friends to be here next Thursday, June 19th at 2 p.m. I hope you join us again to hear about those summertime habits. In the meantime, please feel free to message us with your questions or show ideas at yogabizstudio@gmail.com. As always, our website is yogabizstudio.com, and you can find us on the social networks of Google+, Facebook, and Twitter under the handle of Yoga Biz Studio.
Excellent. Thanks, Keeley. And everyone that's been watching, we thank you as well for being part of our audience today. Our Yoga Biz Studio show is brought to you weekly by Keeley Mitchell, principal at Z Living, and by me, Carla Wilson, owner of Wilson Media Services. So until next week, everyone, namaste.
Namaste.